Hello, and welcome to another episode of Boundless Body Radio. I'm your host, Casey Ruff, and today we have another amazing guest to introduce to you now. Benjiman Boyd is a graduate researcher and metabolic health advocate dedicated to exploring the intersection of diet and neurometabolism. With over 7 years of personal experience successfully managing ADHD and depression through a ketogenic lifestyle, he brings a unique blend of lived insight and academic rigor to the field. Currently, his thesis work investigates the potential of a ketogenic diet as a treatment for borderline personality disorder. Benjiman's ultimate mission is to obtain clinical licensure and certify a metabolic ketogenic therapy with the specific goal of bringing these life changing metabolic interventions to patients across upstate New York. He is a good friend and co collaborator with our good friend and former podcast guest, Stephen T., and was recently hosted on my dear friend Robyn Dobbins' amazing podcast, KetoBiography. Benjiman Boyd, what an absolute honor it is to welcome you to Boundless Body Radio.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate the invite.
Yeah, of course. It's such an honor to host you. You came highly recommended from Stephen T. And I was able to listen to your episode that you did with Robyn on keto biography. It was absolutely wonderful. I know you mentioned that that was your very first ever podcast appearance, and it didn't sound like that at all. Sometimes people come across like a little bit nervous or, they're not willing to share a bunch of details, but you certainly were. You came across as a natural. So we're going to release this episode after Robyn's. But either way, you did an amazing job. And so it's such an honor to host you here as well.
Thank you, thank you. Yeah, it's kind of like it's not like I don't have nerves whatsoever, but like I feel like as a clinical mental health counseling grad student, we kind of learn to not necessarily desensitize, but learn to like hide our emotions in front of clients. So I feel like that sort of gives me the advantage a little bit. Believe me, I am nervous, but I'm good at, good at hiding it, I guess. So
Well, you did a great job. And yeah, you're absolutely a natural. I love that. The listener can probably tell, or somebody watching, that we just got back from a trip to Mexico, and the cacophony of coughing and sneezing and running noses all through the airports and planes and everywhere we were on the resort. I think finally caught up to me, and my voice is a little bit shot. It's nice when you're eating, in the way of a ketogenic lifestyle, and you just don't tend to get sick, or it's not nearly as severe oftentimes. But I'm going to try to minimize my talking on this podcast. But before we do, we're recording this episode right before Christmas. I'm not sure if you grew up celebrating Christmas or any other holidays, so I want to start there, and I've got some icebreakers for you.
okay, yeah. Yeah, I do
Did you?
I do celebrate Christmas. That's pretty much been what's immersed me or just like completely been the center of my life right now. But
Okay.
yeah, I got a little bit of time to do some background refreshers on my own research. I try to give myself breaks, but I'm not very good at it. But
Such
tried
a
my
hard worker.
best.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so question number one: what is the best gift you ever received for Christmas?
Oh my gosh, that's a good question. So when I was really little, this was probably the start of my like extremely long timeline of gaming. I had originally gotten, I believe, my first video game was Sonic 2 for the Sega Genesis. But I thought, like what's better than this? And I would go to the arcade sometimes and I'd really, really love Pac-Man. And I'd love Miss Pac-Man and all these different, like because of how like the fact that it was so simple, uh, it was also extremely challenging, and to get to those really high scores was something I really always wanted to achieve. And one year, my uncle wrapped up a Pampers di box of diapers, and I was like, "What?" I was probably like 7 or 8 at the time. Obviously, didn't need diapers, but I then opened it and like thinking I was truly, truly, I truly believed that. It was diapers in it, but turns out it was a Pac-Man plug and play, and I had that for like, oh gosh, half a decade. I spent a long time on that game, and that was probably what what for me was, though I had gotten video games in later Christmases, it was like the one plug and play, staple video game that stood out, and it was
Got
fun.
it.
Did that.
Nice. Oh, that's awesome. Sega was probably the last console that I was like somewhat proficient in, like maybe like NHL 95 or something, I remember. But my answer also predates yours a little bit, but was an NES console. In 89, I believe it was. I'd asked my parents for an NES. Some of my friends had them. It was hard no. And then Santa brought one with Blades of Steel, which was super fun, a hockey game, which I was super into. And yeah, that was my best Christmas gift ever. Okay, next question. What was your worst Christmas gift you ever got? Could be
Oh,
like stupid or embarrassing or whatever. First that comes to mind.
oh man. I think another thing where I was kind of duped. I was like I was truly there wasn't too many gifts quite yet. I saw that there were gifts under the tree, but one of the first gifts I saw in my stocking was these huge lumps of coal. And I took it to heart for a little bit because I was like, oh my God, I actually got some coal, but there's presents. So was I like half good, half bad that year? But turns out it was bubble gum. It was one of those like bags of coal that was actually bubble gum, and I was like, oh, okay. So Santa was just joking around with me.
That's pretty good. Yeah, that's awesome. I love that one. The worst one I ever got, it ended up being a good gift, but I don't know if you ever had the experience of getting a gift that needed to be charged and it didn't come like charged up when you got it. So I remember getting this like awesome remote control car as like my main gift, but like you had to charge it initially for like 6 or 7 hours, which on Christmas morning,
Oh,
when
geez.
that's like your main gift and you have to like sit there where everybody's like playing with their gifts and you can't really do anything for like 6 or 7 hours, I remember just being absolute torture. I think that again, the gift was good, but that was one that stood out as like, well, this sucks. I wish Santa would have thought of maybe charging this up a little bit first.
Right, yeah. No, I totally get that because I had also so I'm a December baby, so I would like have Christmas or a birthday and then Christmas back to back. But the problem was is I was like a pretty active kid and I really enjoyed skateboarding. And there was one year where I got like this pro element board and I was like, oh, I really wanted to skate this, but I got to wait 5 months until I can actually use it. Because I live in upstate New York, so it's just the winters are treacherous. And where I was from, we didn't have any indoor skate parks, so it was just a big, like just a long waiting game. And I hated every second of it.
That's amazing. Now that you say that, I actually remember a time when Christmas must have fallen on a Sunday. So all the stores were closed that day. And I got some like defective gift that we needed to return. But here in the Salt Lake Valley, like everything, because everything's so LDS Mormon around here, nothing is open on Sunday. So I couldn't return it
Mm.
even that next day, the 26th, when most stores would have been open. They're not open around here. So waiting like 48 hours to make a return on a Christmas gift, I remember being very torturous as well. So I like your answer to that. That's a good one. And then last Christmas question, what is a standout memory? Just something could be funny, could be embarrassing, could be special, just a special Christmas memory you have.
I guess the last one I remember was having a huge chunk of my family coming over and this is kind of a rarity now because we all live in different parts of the world and now just kind of we send each other postcards and say Merry Christmas or whatever, but a lot of us due to scheduling conflicts just can't make it to Christmas all in one place. But this one year we had everybody there and we all sat down to play a board game called Balderdash. And I remember that being what seemed to be like one of the happiest moments in our family's history. Um, just everybody smiling, laughing, having a fun time. You have those Christmases where it's like, oh, kind of a drag because you got to drive all the way up there, and then by the time you get there, it's dinner, presents, and then you got to go back home. And it's just a drag for some people. And that year alone, when they had time to play that board game, and I think it was like a kind of more like adult game, or like I didn't get it or whatever. So I just watched people play it, but they loved it. Everybody had a great time, and yeah, I remember sitting around my grandmother's dining room table, and yeah, they were all just ecstatic about this one game that I never understood, but it was just, to see them smiling and to look back at it compared to now where everybody's so busy, it's definitely one of the more memorable moments.
That. Yeah, that's awesome. I'll share with you one of mine. So my dad does sports here in the Salt Lake Valley, and so oftentimes one of the college football teams around here is playing in a bowl game on Christmas Day, and so it wasn't always a given that my dad could like wake up with us on Christmas morning, and so my parents made an arrangement that Santa would come to our house early on Christmas Eve night before my dad had to fly out with the team. And so one year, just after I got my license, Santa was bringing us an air hockey table, but this air hockey table needed to be assembled by Santa Claus, and so I was given the task of loading up my little siblings into the minivan and driving them around town and up into the mountaintops to kind of see if we could see Santa flying in. And this was just the time that cell phones were coming on. And so every now and again, I'd be able to check on, Santa's progress of building this air hockey table. Or Santa wasn't the best at constructing things, apparently, and it took him a very, very long time. So
He
it was a
didn't have
lot of
his
like,
elves with him that time.
oh yeah, it was like
Uh,
2 hours driving around. I'm like, hey, is Santa like done? Like, no, like cursing and trying to figure out how to install this air hockey table. We drove around and put quite a few miles on that minivan that night looking for Santa Claus. And yeah, like I said, not very good at assembling air hockey tables, but yeah, I really appreciate that. Thank you for sharing some of those Christmas memories. I really love that. And it strikes me like listening to your story on Robyn's podcast. It sounds like one of the things that you have dealt with in your own life is even having the ability to remember moments like that. I mean, you've suffered with a bit of mental health issues and all kinds of health issues, actually. And so I'm wondering if you can kind of share your own personal journey of how that evolved and, even related to the way that you're able to, recall special memories and remember certain things. Doesn't sound like that was a given all the time.
Yeah, yeah, it really wasn't. Especially during the early teen years, it was just a lot of being on autopilot and kind of just getting through the day. Even though I had eventually dropped out of high school and didn't have as much responsibilities as I did, it was just as much of a battle dealing with mental illness and just switching back and forth between different medications. And eventually, thankfully, before the diet, thankfully, I was able to get off medications and then start the diet. But like, to think of it in terms of like the conventional way of getting off of medications and going into like a dietary regimen, I feel like I'm very lucky in that I could kind of detach myself from the medical world and trick like titrating off medications before I did the actual diet. It seems like if you were to go into a lot of people I'm sure have this problem. They go into their physician and they hear about this new diet, see all the results across different, lived experience blogs, stories, maybe even they look into the scientific literature. Um, they see all this progress, but then they go to their physician and they say like, well, it's not really that evidence-based. It's very new, but you can give it a try and eventually like they have a particular roadblock, they don't have like a support system they need and they just stop and like depending on how it goes, go back into the cycle of medication. So, thankfully, I was able to get off of ADHD meds and antidepressants beforehand, and that gave me some time to actually hone in on the science behind the ketogenic diet, um, and especially looking into the psychiatric side of it. I had started originally just for weight loss, but when I got into the psychiatric literature, it made sense as to why I was feeling the way I felt, remembering the things I did. Like memory was very sharp, my focus was a lot better. Um, and eventually, like it was just complete exponential upward momentum. Um, and a while back, um, though I was kind of on my own, I had the support system of my mother, and my mother actually started it with me. She no longer does the diet, but she had started it with me, and I also had my stepfather who was doing it with me. So if it weren't for not only that like getting rid of the meds first and having the support system of my mom and stepdad, I'm not even sure if I would be here talking to you, I let alone being in my master's program and even going to college in the first place. So yeah, it evolves with time, but what really, really, brings it home keeps you on the diet is having that support system along with having someone who can support you through the titration of medications, eventually getting off them, or, staying on them if need be. But it's there's no denying that the ketogenic therapies for mental illness work in a lot of different instances. Uh, we now have all different kinds of academic literature on its effects on multiple disorders, neurological and psychiatric. Um, and I think that my research right now is just kind of the next step in realizing the actual breadth that ketogenic therapy has on health, you
Yeah.
know.
No, that support is so critical. And I think anybody who's familiar with the world of metabolic psychiatry would think that your journey was fairly unique in that sense, that you were able to get off the medications even before finding, ketogenic metabolic therapies. Most people, it's kind of the opposite, where they have to address diet and lifestyle first before they can kind of titrate down. So that's a little bit interesting. But let's talk about like where your health issues started. You mentioned weight loss, and that was kind of the entry point for you. Did you always struggle with weight from a child?
Yeah, pretty much. I was about, I was always an athletic kid, but around 6 or 7 years old, I just started, putting on the weight. I would have different rashes, different like odd things that a kid my age, that age, wouldn't normally have, just all of a sudden. And I would, do what most conventional nutritionists at the time would say. I would do a low calorie, high carb, low fat diet, basically going off of the classic My Plate protocol of nutrition. And I would be fairly active. I used to skateboard as a kid. I would play soccer. I would do baseball. I mean, I wouldn't be nonstop all day doing active exercise, but I was, it wasn't adding up the amount of weight I was gaining relative to my lifestyle. Um, and it just compounded over time. And by the time I was 13, 14, I was pre-diabetic, and by 15, 16, I was over 300 pounds. So it was like, wow.
Wow.
I don't,
Wow.
it's like I was sick, but didn't really understand why. We had tried all different kinds of diets. My grandparents had spent a good chunk of change getting me like into weight loss camps. In fact, the problem was not just the physical health. It was of course the mental health, but the academic performance that preceded the mental health issues. I was struggling really bad in junior high, and eventually high school. I was just, no matter how hard I tried, I just didn't get the energy, the motivation to actually do my homework, and that's what led me to dropping out. Um, but yeah, all the while there was just these physical conditions that kept accumulating, like prediabetes. I was just gaining more weight and more weight, getting different rashes. Um, and I just had something had to give, and what gave was my academics. So I begged my mom to get me out of school. And uh, Even before that, it was kind of like the straw that broke the camel's back, because we had struggled to keep me in school for, gosh, 2, 3 years before I had even thought about dropping officially. To get to that weight loss camp I mentioned, my mother had to go to the superintendent of my school to make an exception for me, because I technically didn't pass 8th grade, and I needed to go that summer for the weight loss camp. They had already, paid the bill and everything. So I was pretty much pushed up to 9th grade. Like it was slim to none, this idea that I was going to get through to high school, but I actually technically made it to 9th grade. But by 9th grade, it was just same thing all over again, and I'm just like, I'm done. I'm done. I need to figure out this physical stuff. before I can this physical and mental health stuff before I can do anything. And I'm just glad I'm thankful enough to have a mother who, despite going against what many people had told her not to do, she got me out of school and we really honed in on the physical health side. And eventually, slowly but surely, I had gone back to school, graduated with my high school equivalency, got my bachelor's with honors, and now I'm in my master's program. So though it wasn't a conventional route, I'm so glad to be where I'm at, and I owe a lot of my success to the ketogenic diet.
It's amazing. Wow, thank you for sharing that. I'll never forget this podcast, a very, very popular national podcast. This episode released a few years ago now, and they did such an amazing job addressing the problem that we were having in America, and such a terrible, poor job of identifying a solution. And so they were saying that the childhood obesity problem is really increasing. It's a really big deal. People are having a tough time to lose weight. They cited a study where they went to a school district. They had a school district that was adjacent to this one, but they went into one school district and said, okay, we're going to give you education around exercise. We're going to feed you more fruits and vegetables. We're going to make sure the kids are a little bit more active. And the other school district that was the control didn't do anything different. And this podcast, guest said that in the study, there was no difference in weight loss between the two school districts. And so, the conclusion wasn't, hey, maybe we're doing the wrong thing for weight loss, and that, increasing exercise and adding more fruits and vegetables is not necessarily going to be the best thing for weight loss. What they identified is that since that didn't work, this is clearly a genetic problem, and we need to start recommending Ozempic at younger and younger ages, or bariatric surgeries starting at age 13. It was just so embarrassing to hear, like, yeah, you identified what the problem was, but you have no idea what the solution could be. It's absolutely ridiculous. And on that note, I just wanted to ask you, for somebody who's never been, I certainly have never been, what is it like to actually be in a weight loss camp? Like, what was it like to be inside there?
Oh gosh. Well, this one in particular, though I've heard stories of others ex being very extreme in nature, was kind of welcoming. Though we had a strict schedule, and from pretty much from 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. we were doing something, and usually that something was some kind of physical exercise. Um, but it's funny because even though it was labeled as a weight loss camp, there was a lot of different people that just wanted to go to just reconnect with their friends from last year, and I felt a real sense of camaraderie despite feeling super homesick at the time. I was probably 13 or 14, so being away from home for that long was a lot for me. Um, it was it was regimented, but again, it was the classic my plate protocol in terms of nutrition. We had very low calorie meals, very low fat meals during lunchtime and dinner time, and it was all strict, rudimentary. And eventually, I had lost about 22 to 23 pounds over the course of 3 weeks, and that was all right. But when I started the ketogenic diet, it was exponentially better. Not only that, but I felt so much more clear. It wasn't forced. Um, I had started in May of 2017. When I did that, after a month's time, maybe I had probably lost about 30 or 40 pounds. Next month, another 30 or 40, and eventually I went from 300 in 2017 to 185 in summer of 2018. So it was just like I was just extra skin and bones by then. I was like, okay, I got to start building muscle now because this is getting a little scary. But um, no, my approach pretty much through the entire thing was reducing stress. Um, I had learned the stress reduction like model of a ketogenic diet where it was very high amounts of potassium, magnesium, sodium to just keep the adrenal glands at bay, and um, just taking long walks. It really helped that I was not in school dealing with academic stress at the time. Um, and I don't think I'd see as good a results if it weren't for that, honestly. But eventually, I went into school and I kept at the ketogenic diet, and though I had had like, a couple of quote cheat days where like I would have a Quest bar. It's like technically, has all these fillers and stuff, but like I kept at it and it wasn't really hard to stay strict. I felt a lot better and it wasn't like many of my foods tasted bad. We had mostly bacon and uh, very big salads and a lot of avocados just to keep the minerals flowing as I was doing my moderate exercise. And another thing to point out was for probably the first year and a half, I wasn't doing very much exercise. It was just keeping at the diet and going for walks once in a while. This was all to just reset, reduce the stress, and find out if this is the actual issue was my health. And it turns out it was because now I'm just um, I'm kind of cruising through graduate school. I'm enjoying every bit of it and doing my metabolic psychiatry research on the side. So um, again, it's a big benefactor of the ketogenic diet in terms of my academic success. Um, and it only makes sense for me to go into this field and see about the neurometabolism of personality formation because the actual premise behind personality, it's not just who you are, it's it's temperament, so like the biological underpinnings, the genetic proclivity towards certain behaviors, your sense of identity, and then the actual behaviors and events that cultivate who you are. And we can only hope that the entire personality is a firm but steady integration between identity and your own behaviors. Um, when you experience something, uh, though you may have different ideas of or like different interpretations of that event, there are certain retractions and pushes forward to actually kind of stretch yourself a little bit and to learn different social norms and cues and stuff like this. And the way that you adapt to these certain situations are what partly make who you are. Borderline personality disorder often when that happens, those interactions that help you sort of adapt to environments and cultivate your idea of social norms and culture within your groups uh, becomes extremely overwhelming. These adaptations become maladaptations where you may interpret things differently, and ultimately your interpersonal relationships are very unstable. And it often comes from this extreme fear of abandonment, which in BPD specifically stems a lot from childhood trauma. Um, so, uh, like it's not only a detrimental disorder, but a lot of people don't like to actually treat it. And it's not because it's not because there's anything, it's not like a necessarily personal personality issue. It's just that it's so emotionally demanding to actually treat these clients. Um, Yet there are no, and the fact is, despite having I think three or four theoretical approaches specific for BPD, there are no FDA approved medications specifically for BPD, and it's been basically a trial and error throwing different medications at them, different antipsychotics, anxiolytics, mood stabilizers, antidepressants, and just seeing what helps. There are some that have technically worked a little bit, but and what's interesting is that BPD, if they stick to treatment, often has a very good success rate. It's about 80 to 100% of people who actually adhere to psychotherapy and medication tend to like experience full remission within like 2 or 3 years after psychotherapy is ended. But the thing is many of them don't adhere, and that's the issue. There's probably a 50 to 52% non-adherence rate for most psychotherapy, even dialectical behavior therapy, which is one of the kind of cornerstone evidence-based psychotherapies for BPD. So, and another thing, of course, when you look at all of these different medication or different psychiatric disorders, their medications often have metabolic consequences. So antipsychotics like olanzapine, clozaril, um, Haldol in the United States, for probably first and second generation antipsychotics, uh, come with rapid weight gain. They come with insulin resistance. They come with an overall metabolic dysfunction, which leads to a cascade of all different kinds of metabolic issues. Um, we give patients drugs that make them feel physically worse and foggy, and then label them as non-compliant, and eventually they drop out. That's usually how it goes. And like again, it's not necessarily that like their treatment resistance. It's just that the problem it's not that they can't get better. It's that they drop out before the treatment actually works. So I'm hoping that ketogenic therapy, whether they believe in it or not, can sort of get them through those hurdles to get them through psychotherapy and work as a true adjunctive treatment, even if they decide not to go completely on the diet afterwards. Um, there's a lot of different neurobiological literature on this. Um, of course, what you've probably heard in the neurobiological literature of bipolar is like this idea of metabolic overdrive, where different limbic circuits are having extreme excitation of glutamate and kind of wearing out the mitochondria within executive circuits. And then in terms of like mitochondrial population you see more in the amygdala in a lot of psychiatric medications. So if there's any kind of metabolism happening, it's in lower emotional based circuits and nothing in terms of executive function and error correction. So um, it's ultimately an energy problem. So it only makes sense that if you go onto a ketogenic diet, if you switch over to a new energy substrate, you can then uh, allow for glucose metabolism or different metabolites that make for long-term potentiation of executive functioning neurons. You can actually like let the load off a little bit and then potentially go back into a glycolytic state. But again, I would consider, because ketones are so sustainable and a lot cleaner for the brain that you stay on it, um, it's a one step closer in the right direction. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Interesting. A point of clarification. Borderline personality disorder. Is that something that you dealt with personally as well as being a topic of your research today?
No, I thought of it in abnormal psychology class. Um, we were going through all the different mental disorders, and after a little bit, I thought in my overly ambitious mind, now that I'm on keto and can actually keep up in class, so it's like, what's the most challenging mental disorder? Like, what's the most ambiguous? What's mo the most like understood or misunderstood? And what came to mind was borderline, because it's a it's relatively small population, but the fact that it was so historically misinterpreted, I thought it was super fascinating. Like for probably, I think it was a Dr. Adolf Stern. He was a Columbia professor who had termed the or had coined the term borderline because it was kind of an in-between state between psychosis and neurosis at the time. Of course, it's more of a generalization nowadays, but it was a step in the right direction. And many of his colleagues had kind of brushed it off as just a fluctuating form of schizophrenia. And for a good 50, 60 years, it was still misinterpreted as a kind of ambulatory schizophrenia where they would have these psychotic episodes and then kind of seclude. And when it came to relationships, there was kind of an issue. Um, but as things like new DSM criteria came out, like attachment theory came to be, we understood it more as a an issue in terms of personality formation and less about um, overall like psychotic symptoms. Um, and I found it super fascinating. So after a little bit, I got further and further into the kind of the neurobiology of ketogenic therapies and thought like let's take this old paper, see if we can like look further into the neurobiology of ketones and ketone metabolism and see how this might help in terms of an adjunctive treatment because again, it's a 50% non-adherence rate. Though treatment has been very successful, to get people through that treatment is often extremely difficult. So I'm hoping that like it's kind of gonna help manufacture more GABA, less glutamate excitotoxicity in these areas, most notably the anterior cingulate cortex, which deals with this error correction when you encounter social interactions, and then hopefully, in conjunction with psychotherapy, it will get them through at least to that point where they can go out and manage symptoms, manage these interpersonal episodes, and get them to a better place.
Yeah, wow. Well, that's really well explained. I was going to ask you for somebody that has never heard of this before, um, and is hearing this for the first time. I think step one is understanding that any diet could actually do this. What the hell does diet have to do with anything related to the brain? As Georgia Ede famously said, like last time I checked, I think the brain is attached to the body. So if one's good for one, it's probably good for the other. But then also there's this other component of not only can diet help, but it's a very unconventional diet. Like what the hell is the point of curing mental disorders or having this be an adjunct, like you said, to help with other therapies when it's just going to turn around and kill me of a heart attack because I'm eating all this cholesterol or whatever. Like everybody knows that red meat is bad for you, that cholesterol is bad, that saturated fat is bad. How do you get around some of those barriers? Explaining both of those things. Number one, that changing the diet can have an effect, and number two, that the diet itself is flying in the face of anything that people are seeing in headlines in the news and in magazines and all that stuff. Everything against what they've been told by the American Heart Association, the U.S. government, all that stuff.
Yeah. Um, Again, that's where I'm super lucky that in that I was able to kind of detach myself from the medical system at a very early age. Um, though I'm not completely demonizing the medical field, we need it for a lot of different things. You know, if I break my leg, if I'm going to, go hiking and break my leg, of course I'm going to need a physician to help me out, or if I need a particular surgery, of course. But in terms of preventative care, a lot of it can be done through nutrition. And I think that a big issue is um, these physicians understanding the kind of outdated model of nutrition and telling all of your patients what's best despite not being particularly specialized in it. Um, and it's really tough to do that because you think of your physician as kind of this authority figure. You've gone to, maybe 8, 9, 10 plus years to school to actually tell me what to do. So I don't have to do my own research. I can go about my day and trust that what you have to say is valid and will actually work. Um, so to there's a point where everyone has to have a sense of autonomy and independence from someone in their life, but I think it's an especially harder issue to find a sense of autonomy in your own health and detaching from that authority schema that you have with your physicians or the medical system in general. They're there to help you in some cases, and they're trying the best they can with what they understand and what they've been taught. But a lot of what they've been taught in terms of nutrition is it's just absolutely false. And I'm so glad to have, you know, been in a situation where I was able to detach myself, do my own research, and then um, give to the world something that may actually be helpful on a core level, a systemic level, in terms of their individual health. So,
Yeah.
yeah, getting past those barriers of these schemata of different authority and kind of know everything kind of mentality of the medical system and everything is really what got me through and to where I'm at now for sure.
Yeah. It's amazing. I can confirm the last time I came across somebody with a broken leg, I ran up to them and said, "Hey, you should eat keto," and it didn't help at all. It was really weird. I thought for
Yeah.
sure it was going to help, and
Yeah, we need
sure,
doctors for
sure.
some things, you know, so
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly. I love that. So, I there's no threat of me ever going to grad school. I can tell you that right now. What has been the process like to do that and to put together your research? It sounds like putting a thesis like this together is a tremendous amount of work. How have you been able to approach this and kind of organize things to get your idea across?
Um, well, it's mostly been on my own considering, especially in grad school. At Niagara University, where I'm at currently, they only offer a practicum track rather than a thesis track or a research track towards a master's degree. So, when I mentioned a thesis, there was really it was kind of left there. We didn't do anything with it, and I've just been doing my practicum and internship hours. Um, and it's been really eye-opening having my internship hours, seeing how the actual mental health care system works so far. Um, but in with my thesis, it's been mostly me uh, doing my own literature reviews. I've collaborated sort of collaborated with a few other people to kind of get the message across. But in terms of writing the literature review and conducting my own proposals and my protocol documents, it's all been on my own, and I can only hope that I'll potentially get the funding to start publishing, and I've been seeing about transferring into a PhD program here in Albany, so I can hopefully conduct some kind of small either case study or different case series on keto for BPD patients. Um, I'm still in the process of actually making a final copy, though my preprint is out. I see it being something that even if I don't get into a PhD program, I really want to have this out to the world and just propose the idea because from what I've seen and from how many people who have read it so far, it's a conversation worth having, whether you're in the keto sphere or not. So, yeah, I can only hope that it's of some value to anybody who's willing to read it.
I'm sure it will be. And even if it changes a few lives out there, it'll be incredibly valuable for those personal lives. So I really appreciate that you're doing that. You mentioned that it was a little bit eye opening to see how the medical industry kind of works with mental disorders here in this country. What has that been like? And are people, not only patients, but maybe some of the people that are in the program with you, other people in the medical system, how open are they to learning about this? Have you had a lot of like curiosity? Do people ask questions? Do they want to know about this stuff?
Um, There's only been one instance where I've been able to formally present the ketogenic diet for mental illness, and many of it uh, was met with, encouragement, but they were more so uh, kind of just with their kind of left with their tail between their legs, sort of like I think that it wasn't intentional whatsoever, but they just said, well, now I feel bad about what I'm eating. And now I feel like I should be doing this. And I'm like, that's not what I'm trying to like, that's not what I'm trying to do. I want to explain it in the most simplest way possible and give you a couple academic resources. Um, but yeah, in terms of overall feedback, it's been positive, and I've actually been able to advertise kind of our new nonprofit Metabolic Collective uh, towards all the grad students at my school, and I'm only hoping that they though I didn't explain my thesis or anything, give keto for mental illness a read. I had mentioned a couple of like the Ohio State study with Dr. Volek and all of his lab partners, um, with the depression study there at Ohio State, and I think also Shabani Sethi's pilot study. Um, but yeah, that's pretty much the extent for what I've shown to my grad cohort. Um, but yeah, with though it was one presentation, it got relatively positive feedback, and many of the questions they had weren't defensive. They were just clarifying questions, and I was only glad that I was able to give somewhat of a clarified answer. There's so much to learn in this field, and it's such a mystery, the actual underpinnings of ketone metabolism and how it really works with different neural circuits. So um, I'm very glad to have gotten that opportunity to present. And but I mean, there's still so much to learn, you know.
It's just on the one hand, I'm so happy and encouraged that you got a positive reception. People were not defensive. Like, that's awesome. I love to hear that. At the same time, it's so mind blowing to me that people are not throwing you a parade in the streets or shooting off fireworks in their office when they hear about some of this stuff. You're talking about disorders that you've already told us medications do not work for. We're throwing stuff at the screen to see what sticks. Nothing's really working. It is compliant. Like if you can get compliance in somebody, they might get some good treatment. But the problem is the compliance. People cannot stick with this. Why not try diet? Why not try this? You could just try this and see
Right.
if it worked. And if it worked, awesome. And if it doesn't, that's fine. And I could show anybody a few pictures of what ketogenic meals look like, and they're not really that far off of what anybody would consider a healthy diet. It could look Mediterranean. It could look vegetarian. It could look like, my plate. It just has a few less cups of rice and a few less beans and maybe
Yeah.
some vegetables. Somebody doesn't even have to go full carnivore like I have been. Like they could just start to mix these things up and lower a bit of the carbohydrates and have some other things. And anybody should agree that that's a healthy diet. It's so mind blowing that more people are not more interested in this stuff and are like wanting you to speak everywhere and wanting to see your research. Like it's such an interesting kind of balance between those two things because it's again, it's great. I don't know that we could have said 5, 10 years ago that you would have had an open reception with some of that stuff, but at the same time, I really wish this message was getting out a little bit more openly and people were more willing to try this because the barrier to entry is not that high. It's not that expensive.
Yeah.
It's not that difficult, especially when you consider you can eat a meal, be super full, not need snacks anymore. It's crazy that more people do not want to just try this. Why not?
Right. Yeah, and that's another thing I emphasized was that it's so versatile, and the fact that it's so easily measurable compared to all other nutrition regimens for mental health. We have just it's whether or not you're in a state of ketosis, and when you're in blood ketone level of 0.5 millimolar or higher, that's a state of ketosis. You've done it. That's it. There's nothing really there's no like kind of confounding variables that will completely just murky the waters to the point where we can't say anything about this diet. There's obvious correlations between ketone metabolism and beneficial outcomes in mental health. So yeah, I try to be very approachable and try to kind of lean into like this obviously will do better. But at the same time, I don't want to seem dogmatic in my approach. But the thing is, this diet, this despite it being just high fat, it's not dogmatic in the slightest because you have all different kinds of routes you can take. Like I have done plant-based keto, I have done carnivore, I have done ketovore, where it's just like a combination of both. As long as your carbohydrates are low and fat is very high, you will get into a state of ketosis, especially if you're doing exercise. I mean, many of these people are already, they're my grad cohort, especially, they're super high achievers. They're already exercising like crazy. And I'm sure there are many points where they're already in a state of ketosis during high intensity exercise
Absolutely.
and they feel so great afterwards. It's like, well, there's actually a dietary regimen that if you don't have time for exercise, if you don't particularly have a strict exercise regimen, you can get into this state and feel this good. Um, so it's not only versatile, it just caters to all different kinds of lifestyles.
No, I love that. And I love the point. I just want to hammer that home that no other diet has a metric that you can actually measure whether you're in that state or not. If you choose to be vegetarian, you can't count vegetarian points or whatever. If you're
Yeah,
Mediterranean, you can't
exactly.
count the Mediterraneans that are floating around in your blood or cabbage soup diet. Like there's nothing, but you could choose to do a ketogenic diet in any particular way, and you can validate it with very simple and inexpensive tools. If it means something to you, you can try it, and there are ways to do it. So I love that you mentioned that. And I have to say too, doing this podcasting journey, being in this space for as long as I have, getting to talk to people all over the world, I've noticed, and going to conferences, I've noticed that there's many people out there in a similar situation to you where they found this amazing, way of living. They're super pumped up about it, want to share however they can. They maybe feel like they're a little bit isolated. They don't know how to get the message out. They might be from, places in the world where there aren't a lot of resources for them. Places in India or third world countries or whatever. Like people are doing this research. They just feel a little bit siloed and feel that there's not a great way to get this message out. And we've had amazing resources in the last few years pop up, like Bazooki Group and Metabolic Mind and all these different things. But now, recently, like you mentioned, there's the Metabolic Collective, which has an amazing kind of vision and mission to be able to make a hub, if you will, a space where people can come share their talents in any way they choose and have provided resources so that they find effective ways to share their message. What has that experience been like for you to be able to collaborate with them and get that message out in that way?
It's been an absolute gift. A lot of the people on that crew just they're there because they truly care about ketogenic diet's effects on all different kinds of ailments, and they're just looking for um, just to have a place where not only people can share their personal experiences, but those who are professionals in the field have a place to kind of show off their events, their workshops, whatever it may be for certain conditions. And like you said, Metabolic Mind and the Bazooki Group have been doing amazing stuff in terms of research, clinical directories, and overall funding for ketogenic therapies. But for like a support group, for places where people can gather and talk about their experiences, there's not really much out there, at least in an official capacity. So being the Facebook lead for Metabolic Collective has been not only like it's been an eye-opening experience for my kind of leadership journey. I had been in a couple leadership roles in the past, but this has been one where I had been actually leading a full team. um, it's also been a journey for my own ketogenic growth, kind of. Um, I had talked about different personal experiences on Robyn's podcast, and with that, I was able to go on to the Facebook group and talk about what I do in a day. Like I did a little post in the morning, like "Good morning from Western New York. Here's what I'm having for breakfast." It's not to say this is the end all be all breakfast. This is the breakfast of champions, though I would beg to differ if anybody opposed it, having 6 slices of bacon and 8 eggs in the morning. Um, it's just a glimpse into my life and how you can potentially foster different ketogenic strategies throughout your day, despite being on strict keto or not. Like I'm mostly carnivore, though I do have like my almond milk and stuff in my coffee. Um, there's many people who are just coming into this and they're just looking for new routes to get higher fats in. And yeah, with this, I hope with my team we can kind of help cultivate that community in the group, despite it being online. Um, we have had thoughts of doing like in-person gatherings in the future, but right now we're just at the beginning of it all, and we're all really excited for it. I'm really happy to be a part of their team for sure.
Yeah, that's absolutely amazing. I think if nothing else, like sharing that example of the way that you are doing things and making it clear, like you said, like this is not the way you have to do it. But I just think so many people now have that kind of like tainted idea of what keto is. And they think like, okay, well, I can't eat that much bacon or I can't really go around eating like sticks of butter. And it's like, no, no, no. Like you can have butter and bacon, but nobody in our community is just eating bacon and butter. Like you can't live on just that. There's other ways to do it. And to see those practical examples, I think is really helpful because otherwise I feel like this diet can be a little bit intimidating or, again, people have their own ideas of what it is and they think they're not going to be able to stick to it when in reality, it's, again, very easy to do for most people once they get the hang of it. It's very inexpensive. You're full all the time. And the benefits, I mean, it only upside. I've never really seen anybody, even if they decided not to continue with it, have any issues with it. It's only been, potentially helpful for most people. So I love that you're getting this message out there. And I'm so glad that Metabolic Collective is out there to kind of create a community within the community where people can go and get those resources. And I'm so curious to see what you guys are able to accomplish in the future. I have full confidence that it will be continuing to grow and get even more and more amazing as the years go on. And I'm just so grateful to have been introduced to you, and I'm so grateful for you coming on the podcast to share your message and even share some fun Christmas memories. It was a lot of fun too. For now, where can people go to find you and connect with you and your work?
Well, right now I'm just on LinkedIn and on X. You can find my X handle. I think it's BNJI, so just Benji Boyd 4. Um, I'm also Benjiman Boyd on LinkedIn. You can go on Facebook. I'm sure you could find me as well. Um, we have a private Facebook group, which you can see about joining. We are happy to have you. Um, and yeah, we also have the Metabolic Collective X as well, which Stephen T is running, and he's doing an amazing job too. So we hope to get that up and running in the future. Yeah, and besides that, I have my thesis preprint out on ResearchGate. If you want, I can send that to you as well. Uh, Besides that, that's all for me.
It's awesome. Yeah, we'll be sure to link that up if you do want to send that to me. If not, I can search it and get that posted. We just love your work, Benjamin, and so grateful for everything that you've gone through to be able to come out the other side. Like I said, I really hope that this starts to catch on for more people and more people are open to this. But you are a big reason why the message is getting out there to more and more people. And we can only hope that the message will impact several lives out there. So for now, thank you so very much for everything that you do. And thank you for taking time to come on our show today. We really appreciate you.
Not a problem. Thanks again for the invitation.
Absolutely. It was an honor. And this has been another episode of Boundless Body Radio.